This is the Louie T Network.
Man, I love some football. Man, I love some football. My favorite week is week 1, cause I'm watching football. First comes the preseason, and I don't take a day off. And then it gets even better when your team makes the playoffs. 32 teams go hard for one thing. They work for one thing. That Super Bowl ring. 32 teams go hard for one thing. They work for one thing. That Super Bowl ring. We in the lab room.
Who else could it be but me, your man, Louie T? Welcome, you are in the lab room. Of course, I'm your host, Lou. Thank you for joining me on the Tuesday Week 2 edition of In the Lab Room. Man, do we have a lot to talk about today, so I will not delay. Let's get straight to the proceedings this evening. We've got 2 Monday night games to break down, so let's get into our first Monday night showcase. The Detroit Lions hosting the New York Football Giants. The G-Men. So, a couple of storylines going into this game. Eli Manning coming off of one of his worst seasons statistically in his career, led the league in interceptions last year. New offensive coordinator, Ben McAdoo. Kevin Gilbride, the old coordinator, decided to hang it up. Ben McAdoo coming over from Green Bay. How is this offense going to look? It's a whole new offensive line. We know about the struggles of the running back position a season ago, so it's a new running back group. They're dealing with injuries at wide receiver. Their first-round pick, Odell Beckham Jr., ODB, not ready for action yet, so how are the receivers going to fare? And the tight end position was a mess. They had a battle in training camp. No one won this battle per se. Someone won by default. So this offense had a lot of questions. What were going to be the answers in game number 1? You look at the Detroit Lions. From their perspective, brand new head coach Jim Caldwell replacing Jim Schwartz. A lot of undiscipline under the tenure of Jim Schwartz. So you're hoping that Caldwell could come in, instill a little bit of discipline, have this offense. He's an offensive guy, is Caldwell. Hoping he can come in, instill that offensive mentality. Terrell Austin coming over from the Ravens as the defensive coordinator. Could he get this group that is so talented to finally start to play together and produce some results in Detroit? You get into this game. And I was so confident in Detroit winning this game that I made them my sole survivor pick of week number 1. Now, I ultimately went back and changed it, and it ultimately backfired on me, bit me in the tuchus. It's all good, though. I expected Detroit to win this game. Now, did I expect them to win in such convincing fashion? Maybe I did. Maybe I didn't. I'll tell you this much. I said in the preseason, and I said in the draft wrap-up series, and even as far as to say the lab reports, that I didn't think the Giants were very good. And after watching the preseason, they confirmed that for me. So this was a test right here. I wanted to see if the Giants were the team that I thought they were from the preseason. And they answered that with a resounding yes. That first possession was a mess defensively for the Giants. Offensively, they couldn't get anything going. They had to punt. Detroit gets the football, and they're able to connect is Matthew Stafford with Calvin Johnson. Heavens to Muggletron! On a bomb deep, and the 2 Giant defenders, they run into each other and leave Calvin Johnson, Evans to Muggletron, all by his lonesome. He won't find an easier touchdown in his career than the one he got on that first possession on Monday night. Walks into the end zone at 7-0. Detroit takes the lead. The Giants never seem to really get into an offensive rhythm early on in this game. Meanwhile, the Detroit Lions scored on their first 2 possessions, both touchdowns, both to Calvin Johnson, the second of which was a beautiful pirouette by Matthew Stafford to get out of the pocket, to escape the rush, throw off balance, going across his body, back across the field to a diving Calvin Johnson. And there's the Megatron. Once again in the back of the end zone, it's 14-0. What a beautiful catch and an awesome throw by Matthew Stafford. Let me talk about Matthew Stafford for a second. He looks to be in great shape. Matthew Stafford always struck me as a guy that had an extra bit of fat, if you know what I mean. He always seemed to have an extra bit of baggage going on, a little bit of neck fat, a little couple of rolls. You know, he was always a guy that never turned down a meal that he liked. And so he did some things in the offseason. He looks great. And that first touchdown was set up by him giving DeMontre Moore, the monster, a nice little ole, and making him miss and fly by, and then throwing it deep to a wide open Calvin Johnson in the second touchdown, gets out of the pocket, avoids the rush, is able to buy some time while he's backing up, throws across his body to a diving Calvin Johnson. So he is in magnificent shape. Haven't seen him in this good a shape in his entire NFL career. So he's rededicated himself, and he looks great. And the results are even better. It's 14-0 at this point. Giants finally get on the board because the Detroit Lions, and this is a problem that we talked about, them being somewhat undisciplined, a couple of penalties helping along this Giants team that was struggling. It helped them get into the end zone. And this is something that you'll find with offensive coordinators who haven't called plays before. Ben McAdoo and this Giants offense are the beneficiaries of a pass interference penalty in the end zone by Darius Slay. Takes the ball, puts it down at the 1-yard line. You would expect with a big back like Jennings for them to run the football at least one time from the 1-yard line, preferably first down. You get it from the 1, you got a big back like Jennings who usually leans forward. Why not hand him the football? Instead, they throw a back shoulder fade to Donald, the tight end. No avail. They bring in the big receiver that they had, Washington, from the preseason. They give him an opportunity to win a jump ball. He is not able to do so. Now it's third down. You're thinking, okay, are they going to go 3 consecutive plays without running the football? You betcha. They throw another back shoulder fade to the tight end Donald. This time he's able to come down with it in bounds. He came down with it the first time, was not in bounds. Second time was a charm. They get in the end zone. It's 14-7, but that's something that I'm really not comfortable. If I'm a New York Giants fan, I'm not comfortable with being first and goal from the 1 and not running the football not one single time. That's not something that's usually a winning recipe in this league, especially when you got a quarterback like Eli Manning that has turned the football over as much as he has throughout his career. So that was a little dangerous, but it did not backfire. It's now 14-7 in this game. That's the score at the half. And really, the Giants never got into an offensive rhythm in this football game. They really struggled offensively, and that's what I kind of expected. A new offensive line, new running backs. The receivers are still kind of scattered and really don't have a place quite yet. Everybody's learning a new system. I talked about the tight end position really being one that isn't that special. And so the Giants, to me, right now are offensively challenged, and the defense is going to have to step up. Well, they didn't step up in this game. The Detroit Lions basically did what they wanted to do. The Giants did hold them down in the running game somewhat. Again, they weren't as effective as you would have liked them to have been. But again, when the offense is not helping you, and they did not help them, did the Giants offense, it's hard to really put a lot of the onus on the Giants defense. Second half, more of the same from the Detroit Lions. They run up and down the field. They're able to do some things. Matthew Stafford able to show that newfound mobility that I talked about, able to scramble and get in the end zone to add another touchdown onto the scoreboard. Eli Manning ends up being picked off a couple of times in the game, and that leads to more points. So when it's all said and done, the Giants are beat up and blown out in the first Monday night game of the season, 35-14. Big win for Detroit at home, gives them some momentum. This is a scary Detroit Lions team now. I will say a couple of things that I think you need to realize that it could be a problem down the line if you're a Detroit Lions fan. That secondary seems like it's a little sketchy in Detroit right now. A lot of young guys back there. You had some backups in the game. I understand that, so I know that the secondary maybe doesn't look exactly the way it will, say, in 4 or 5 weeks from now, but looks a little sketchy back there. A lot of younger guys, and Bill Bentley went down at one point. Don't know if the extent of his injury or not, but this is a secondary that is extremely young, and I saw some penalties out there that could come back to cost you in other ball games when you're playing against better opposition. But to say this much about the Detroit Lions, this was an impressive showing against a team that I thought was inferior to you. Way to go out and beat the brakes off of them and get a win. If you're the Giants, this is simply a situation where you're just looking to build confidence. You're looking to kind of get comfortable with all your surroundings. New offensive coordinator, new pieces all around. Again, new offensive line, new running backs, receivers are being shuffled around. Everything around Eli Manning is changing right now, and so you've got to expect them to get off to a slow start offensively. Hopefully, at some point, everything will click. There were times where Eli Manning would change plays. They do a lot of hand signals as they chronicled during the telecast, and he would roll out to one side of the field, and the guys in front of him, the two receivers that he signaled to, they're blocking. So someone isn't getting the signals, and something's being lost in translation along the way. Either way, it was a mess in terms of the offensive display for this Giants team. They've got a lot of work to do. Back to the drawing board for the New York Football Giants. They're 0-1 on the season, and the Detroit Lions are now 1-0. We'll take a short break, come back with our second Monday night showcase of the program, that being the second Monday night game of that doubleheader. Cardinals hosting the San Diego Superchargers.
Social media has taken off in ways that I couldn't have imagined. And thus, I've taken the liberty to start being more active on social media. So like me on Facebook at In the Lab Room. Follow me on Twitter at In the Lab Room. You can also +1 me on Google Plus at Louie T. And also, of course, my main hub, subscribe to my channel on YouTube. That's youtube.com/In the Lab Room. These are all ways that I'm looking forward to interacting with you, the viewers, in the upcoming season of the Louie T Network.
So the second game of the doubleheader on Monday night featured the Arizona Cardinals at home versus the San Diego Chargers. San Diego Superchargers. And these are two teams that I feel like sky's the limit for them if they can just find a way to survive their divisions. They play in arguably two of the better divisions in all of football. Now, I think the Kansas City Chiefs are going to have a down year. The Raiders are no slouch. But we all know the Denver Broncos are a powerhouse, could eventually be in the Super Bowl once again if they have their go of it and their way of it. And of course, the Arizona Cardinals won 10 games last season and still did not qualify for the postseason. So you know the type of division that they play in the NFC West with the likes of the 49ers and the eventual Super Bowl champion Seattle Seahawks from a season ago. So these are two teams that if they can just survive their divisions, they could do some things in maybe even the postseason. Who's to say? But this was a big matchup because this was a measuring stick of sorts. I wanted to see, because to me these are two evenly matched football teams, two teams that are right around the same place in their respective conferences. They're not elite teams, but they're on the outside of that playoff tier maybe. The San Diego Chargers made the postseason last year, but they backed their way in, essentially, did the San Diego Chargers. They needed a lot of help, and they got it to get in. But once they got in there, they made some noise. So these are two teams that I feel like are kind of at the same point right now, and they're looking to do some things, both with second-year head coaches. So these two teams have a lot of similarities, both with veteran quarterbacks. So I wanted to see who was going to be able to impose their will on the other. And I felt like because the Arizona Cardinals were at home, they were going to win this game. If this game were in San Diego, I would have been picking the San Diego Chargers. But because the game was in Arizona, I picked the Cardinals. So let's talk about this game and how it came to be. Game got off to a relatively slow start, but I will say Michael Floyd is in rare form. And can we say that he's taken over as the lead man at receiver in Arizona? Larry Fitzgerald didn't get a catch and a completion until the fourth quarter, literally the final drive for this Arizona Cardinals team. And so I don't know how comfortable I am with that, number one. Number two, I feel like he's being phased out somehow because think about it. Jerron Brown is getting a lot of looks. Sheriff John Brown, your rookie out of Pitt State, he's a guy that's going to be targeted a lot this season. So you got to start thinking, and Larry has this huge cap number. I'm starting to think that they're trying to see what life is like without Larry in Arizona. Maybe, maybe not. They're going to talk about his contract after the season anyhow, but just know that Michael Floyd got off to a fast start in this game. After that big completion from Palmer to Floyd, they did not get anything out of it. No points were scored in this game until the second quarter. And I tell you what, and the Cardinals got on the board first in this game with a field goal. I told Chargers fans, and I told the whole AFC West for that matter, during the draft wrap-up series, that your new nightmare in that division was one Jeremiah Atauchu, and he's going by Jerry Atauchu now. Whatever he calls himself, the man is the new Nigerian nightmare. And he got off to one hell of a start in his career with a block punt, which set the Chargers up for some points in this game. And then he set them up for more points later in the game with the sack, strip, forced fumble that was recovered by Dwight Freeney. That led to a touchdown as well. And that was part of a big third quarter by the San Diego Chargers that saw them score 14 points, one on a touchdown gallop by their running back, Matthews, and the other touchdown catch by, and it's good to see Malcolm Floyd back. After that neck injury a season ago, was a little nervous. Could that be the end? He was able to rehab, come back, looks good. Glad to see him back on the field. He catches a touchdown in front of Pat P. And now all of a sudden, you go from a 6-3 Arizona Cardinals lead in the third quarter to now a 17-6 deficit as we enter the fourth quarter. And it seemed like the Chargers were in control of this game. But the Cardinals hung around, and they were able to battle back, and just do enough. They scratched, they clawed, and were ultimately able to get into the end zone when it mattered the most. Carson Palmer made some plays to give the Arizona Cardinals the lead for good. They went for two, unsuccessful. It took the lead 18-17. Chargers had one final opportunity, but they could not get it done as the ball was deflected and still had an opportunity to catch it. Did the second-year wide receiver out of Cal, Keenan Allen, but he was not able to corral the football on fourth down as the Arizona Cardinals hold on. In week number one, final game of week one, kickoff weekend in the National Football League, 18-17. Was a very entertaining game, especially the second half. Seemed like the Chargers were in control of this game, and then the Arizona Cardinals managed to hang around and strike at the end and come back and get it done. They're a tough team to beat at home. They proved that to be the case in this game. They're now 1-0 in the season. Chargers have nothing to be ashamed of. This was a game that they could have stolen, however, and they'll on that flight home, they'll be thinking about plays that they left on the field and opportunities that they may have missed in this game to walk away with the W. They could have stolen this game, but they let it slip through their fingers. They're now 0-1 on the season. So that's going to do it for the Monday night showcase here on the Tuesday edition of In the Lab Room. We're going to take one more quick break, come back, and wrap this show on up. We've got a lot to talk about in this final portion of the show. So let's take this quick break and come right on back. gotten to the final stages of the Tuesday edition of In the Lab Room, and we were going to do 3 and Out today, but there's only room for one topic in today's final portion of the show, and of course, that being the Ray Rice saga. And so we're going to tack on an extra point today. We've driven the football down the field, got into the end zone. Time to tack on this final extra point and send it on home. So this Ray Rice situation is so polarizing because it's a situation where you felt like here's a guy that's already been suspended by the league 2 games. The league has all this backlash from the situation because they didn't think the penalty was harsh enough. You've got all these guys being suspended for drug-related issues and performance-enhancing drugs, and they're getting 4 games and 6 games and 8 games, and conduct detrimental to themselves off the field, and they're getting 9 games in the case of Alden Smith. Yet here's a guy that is pummeling his wife, and he only gets 2 games. So people had a problem with that, and so even though it was too late to go back and have retroactive justice served to Ray Rice because he had already been given out a 2-game suspension prior to the NFL enacting this new rule where you have any kind of domestic violence offense. The first time it's 6 games, the second time you're banned from the league. So before they put that into play, he was already suspended for 2 games. So they couldn't go back and say, hey, now you fall under the guidelines and you're getting 6 games. He had already gotten 2. So it seemed like it was trouble under the bridge, and that we would talk about it once more when he came back, and then everybody would kind of, push that topic to the side, and we'd go back to our regularly scheduled programming. But TMZ would not let it rest. TMZ was able to get footage of the elevator scene, and oh my God, was it horrific or what? Ray Rice with a straight 2-piece combination to the jaw of his wife. As if one wasn't bad enough, Ray came back and hit her with that second left hook, and man, was it vicious. She went down, and she was out for the count. And so to see that type of violence, it's one thing to hear about it, and you have to come up with a mental picture on your own. It's one thing for someone to say, hey, man, he beat the hell out of his wife, and you kind of having to draw your own conclusions and come up with your own inferences. It's one thing to have to do that. It's another thing to actually see it in live, actual color in footage in front of your face, and to actually see him not hit her 1 time, but 2 times, and then stand over her lifeless body, drag it out of the elevator, pick up her shoes, her purse, to just see his mannerisms and see how cold-blooded he was. Boy, that's a vicious man right there. Now, this is the thing that makes this whole situation so egregious, is that not only did we get to see it, but it's a female that he hit. And we could talk about Vic and his situation. We could talk about Plaxico Burress and his situation. We could talk about Adam Jones and all the transgressions he had, Alden Smith, and these guys getting opportunities to redeem themselves. The difference between those guys and what he did is that, number one, those players that I named before him, those guys all did things to impact themselves. They were negatively impacting themselves off the field, which in turn affected the team, which meant the league had to step in. They were breaking the laws outside of football, so it looked bad for the league, but it was things they were doing to themselves. In the case of Michael Vick, it was to dogs. Now, the thing about dogs is everybody isn't a dog lover. Everyone doesn't have affinity for dogs. Like myself, I'm not a huge dog guy. I wouldn't mind having a dog, but if you told me I never would own a dog in my life, I wouldn't lose any sleep over it. And so some people are ho-hum about dogs. Other people are absolute dog lovers. But everyone, and I mean everyone, has some type of significant female in their lives, whether it's a mom, a grandma, a aunt, a sister, a daughter, a wife, somebody that you know as a female, you care for them dearly and could never imagine having them hit the way Ray Rice hit his fiance then and now current wife. You could not imagine that. And so just the thought of having a daughter, having a mom, having a wife be struck the way that he struck his fiance at the time is going to strike a chord in every single man out there and just about every single human being. So that was what made this situation so egregious and made the penalty so swift and harsh. He has been banned from the league indefinitely, and I feel pretty safe in saying he'll never work in this league again. No one wants to be associated with the guy that two-pieced his wife, knocked her out unconscious. And I'll tell you what, he might have a career in boxing if nothing else, because this is the factor that we're not talking about here. What does he do from here on? And I know some of you don't care about what Ray Rice does now that he's done this. I know some of you don't care about what Ray Rice does now off the field because of what he's done to put himself in this position. I get it. I understand that. But just think of it. I don't think he has a nest egg. I don't think he has a lot of money. Remember, he wasn't a first-round pick. He just got paid 2 seasons ago, so he really didn't get to reap the benefits of that money. And keep in mind, when you're playing in the NFL for peanuts, you don't get to buy the house and the car and your mama house and all that stuff. You don't get to do that until you get that big payday. Arian Foster talked about that, you know, how his life had changed when he signed his name on the dotted line because, remember, he was an undrafted rookie free agent. So he was playing for peanuts all those years. He was rushing for all those yards. So same thing with Ray Rice. You know, he wasn't an undrafted rookie free agent, but he was a third-round pick. So he's not a guy that came in with all this fanfare and all this hype and got all this money off the top. So I don't think he has a lot of money. So what does he do now? He's not going to be able to play in the NFL. He's not going to be able to do anything associated with the league. And I'm thinking to myself, what civilian job is he going to get? I mean, everybody saw the footage. Everybody knows what he has done. So it's going to be very tough for Ray Rice moving forward. And the only person that I've seen come up with an explanation and somewhat of the half-hearted plea for Ray Rice has been Ray Lewis, ex-teammate. Said, hey, look, man, he's a product of his environment. He grew up in a situation where his mom was beaten right in front of his face. He was beaten oftentimes in front of others. And so he only knows one thing and how to handle situations in one way. And so he was basically saying, hey, this kid needs help. He's a product of his environment. And that may be true. But again, hey, look, had he done this behind closed doors in the friendly confines of his own home, no one would have ever seen the footage. But that doesn't make it right. But to do this out in the public eye, in an area where you can be exposed that way, to have no regard for who could be watching and just do this lets me know that I don't think that was the first time he had ever done that. And so that was mind-boggling to see that. And just know, everybody doesn't love Raymond any longer. So that's going to do it for this installment of In the Lab Room. I thank you for joining me. If it happens in the National Football League, whether big or small, we cover it all here in the Lab Room. I thank you for joining me. See you tomorrow on the Wednesday edition of In the Lab Room, as we'll be doing some packs, some daps, and some smacks. I'll see you tomorrow on the Wednesday edition of In the Lab Room. Thank you for joining me. See you then.
In the Lab